Optically thin is incident light, mostly in the V-band of the electromagnetic spectrum, is not readily absorbed by a material of thickness Z and/or with a weak attenuation coefficient. Let's take a look at this definition of optically thin. Here we're looking at two images. On the right, we're looking at 2 separate days on Mars. On the left, we're looking at 1 day on Mars, where we can see down through the atmosphere to the surface of the planet, and we see surface features. On the right is another day on Mars, where we cannot see through the big dust storm that's surrounding the planet all the way down to the surface, and we don't see many surface features. On the left, we're looking at the front and back side of Mars on the day of this thick dust storm, where we see different colors indicating optical thickness. Red indicates optically thick, whereas blue or black indicates optically thin. The optically thin region is the polar cap region. This is the region where we can see some surface features on the planet in this thick dust storm. Let's break down optically thin. First of all, let's look at the word optically. Optically means mostly in the V-band of the electromagnetic spectrum. It includes a little bit of the infrared band. So optically is optics, what your eyes would normally see, which is in the V-band. Now let's take a look at thin. What do we mean by thin? There are 2 parts to the thin definition. One is that it's a material of thickness Z. Now what that means is it could be thin or it could be thick. In this case, for thin, we want it to be as thin as possible. So there's not a whole lot of dust at the polar cap, so we can see through this thickness of dust down to the surface features. So that's what we mean by thinness. The second part of the definition is or with a weak attenuation coefficient. And this is the property of the material. In this case, we're looking at dust. We want to know what is the attenuation coefficient of dust. Is it very good at blocking visible light? So you need to understand of your material how much material you have in thickness and the attenuation coefficient. Optically thin is when we want to have some visible light coming down to the surface, penetrate through the atmosphere, hit off the ground, come back out and into our eyes so we can see some surface features. So optically thin would indicate a thin thickness of dust and or a weak attenuation coefficient. So we're able to see through the dust storm down to the surface and see surface features.